Hello there, my name is Benedetta and welcome to Tender is the Read. Today's video is a reading recap of the month of May. So I want to share with you all my thoughts about the 12 books that I've read this month. Before we go, as usual, if you're not already, I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell button so that you get notified whenever I post a new video. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to leave a like. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the video. Starting off with Hamnet by Maggie. This is the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction 2020, and it is a retelling of the life and death of Hamnet, who was the son of William Shakespeare. It is, all in all, a quite interesting portrayal of loss and grief and complicated family dynamics in Elizabethan England. Generally, I think that what I didn't quite click with in this book was the stylistic choice. The writing is just very much like watching a big painting from afar and watching all the characters like going through the movements. You can understand what's happening, but I feel like there is, I don't know, maybe a lack of dialogue or not a lack of introspection per se, but nevertheless I just couldn't feel a strong connection with any of the characters. And perhaps it was because I just sort of disagreed or disliked the way that every character behaved and the choices they made, which is, you know, by no means something that you wouldn't expect, in the sense that a lot of the characters are unlikable by design. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with a book like this. I just think it's a question of taste. I gave it 3 stars. It was extremely readable. I finished it in one night right after buying it, and yeah, an interesting read, one that I didn't particularly click with, but nevertheless. So the second book that I finished this month was Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This novel is about the complicated romance between Cleo, who is an English girl in her 20s living in New York City, and Frank, who is an advertising director in his 40s, who decide to get married and have to navigate their new life together. I don't really read romance or even contemporary fiction at all, and this month I really for some reason went for it, and this book is what kind of started it all. I really enjoyed the vibes of it. I just really clicked in this case, you know, unlike the previous book, with the characters. There's a very large cast, which I appreciated. I think that each character was developed well enough and was entertaining to follow. I have a soft spot for a glamorous New York City setting, so of course I appreciated this. It gave me my year of rest and relaxation vibes in the best way possible. It's sort of like the characters of these two books could be next door neighbors. I don't know, I kind of loved that. It was exactly sort of what I was looking for. A good introduction for me to this genre, and yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read the Voyage Out by Woolf, which is contained in this beautiful Canterbury Classics edition of classic works from women writers. I have a bit of a complicated relationship with Woolf as an author. This is the second novel of hers that I've read, and I just find that her books, unfortunately, are as beautiful as they are exhausting. Just like most of her work, the Voyage Out has a stream of consciousness type of narration, and because of the fact that there are so many characters in this book, exploring each of their psyches just becomes an incredibly heavy endeavor, and it makes the narration non-linear as well as quite complicated to follow. You have to pay a lot of attention, I feel like, to truly enjoy everything that's going on. This book did put me in a bit of a slump. I started it in audiobook form a couple of months ago and I just did not reach for it like ever, and it's a pity because I feel like every book that puts you in a slump is slightly ruined. But I did pick it back up, and when I did and I read it on paper, I could concentrate more, and I do think that when it shines, this book does shine very bright, so it's got that going for it. I gave it 3.5 stars. Just to continue with classics and audiobooks as well, this month I listened to 2 Henry James novels, which are Daisy Miller and Washington Square. This was my first foray into this author and it wasn't super successful. First of all, all, Daisy Miller is a short novel about an American girl in Rome who essentially alienates herself from the good society due to her reckless flirting, which is fashionable in New York but is frowned upon in Europe, and the story develops in a way that is quite actually hopeless, and it's something that I didn't quite appreciate. The characters are either judgmental or clueless, and they're just helpless in that way, and I don't know, it just left a weird taste in my mouth. I suppose that I don't really love novels that are quite sad, sort of for the sake of being sad, and I don't know, I didn't quite enjoy this one. Washington Square gave me a similar impression. It's the story of a prospective heiress who is constantly described as sort of ugly and undesirable, who is eventually pursued by a man who is below her station and whose intentions are constantly doubted by her father in particular, as well as other people. Instead of being an epic story of star-crossed lovers, it just ends up being a story of unending misery with no resolution and an ending open to interpretation. Generally, yeah, I just feel like I don't really enjoy hopeless stories, and this is what it definitely was. I do still think that I'd read more Henry James, but both of these books were 2 stars for me. The final classic that I have here is Beowulf, the classic Old English poem about a warrior and king who defeats monsters and demons and whatnot. The importance of this poem for the development of English literature and as an inspiration to later authors like Tolkien, of course, cannot be stressed enough. But I think the experience of actually reading it was not anything special. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I feel like I've read other epic poems, including earlier ones like the Iliad, say, that is just more layered and where the characters are developed a lot better. Of course, it's much longer, so again, I understand this is an unfair comparison, but I just, from where I'm standing, this was just a bit one-dimensional. It is still a fun hero's journey. It's completely harmless. It's quite short, so I would definitely say that you should read something like this if you haven't already in school. I gave it 2.5 stars. Next up, I've picked up a few mythology retellings. So I'm gonna start with Ithaca by Claire North. This is a retelling of essentially what Penelope got up to in Ithaca when Odysseus was lost at sea after the Trojan War. This is a very interesting book. The thing that I like the most was the fact that the narrator is the goddess Hera, who is given such a funny, witty voice in this. I just really get excited whenever a god is prominently featured in a book, and I just thought that this was done very cleverly. That was my highlight. But there are a few other characters that are featured that make it quite interesting, and it's definitely an out-of-the-box choice. And I'm talking about Electra, Clytemnestra, and Orestes, who spend some time in Ithaca, which is a nice twist on the myth that I appreciated. This is the first book of a series, so the pacing I found was a little bit slow because, of course, it has the job of setting up not only its own ending, but also the sequels. It's not a major issue, but if anything, it made me excited to read the sequel coming out very soon. So this was definitely really nice, and I gave it 4 stars. The second retelling is one that I had been putting off for a long time, and I just read because I found it at the charity shop, and I'm talking about The Science of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a gritty retelling of the Iliad from the perspective of Briseis, who is a slave girl contended between Achilles and Agamemnon. The cool thing is that this book follows the Iliad almost beat by beat in the events that are described, which, you know, is interesting if you, like me, know the poem itself. It's fun to see these episodes from a different point of view. That said, the problem is this is one of those retellings that likes to highlight how much abuse went on in the war camps. Personally, that is not something that I enjoy reading about. So unfortunately, I feel like this one comes down to personal taste, but I still gave it 3 stars. It's not bad. Last retelling is a brand new one. It is Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara, which is a retelling of the tale of Eros and and Psyche, which is a story that is sort of isolated from the most commonly retold Greek mythology lore. But nevertheless, it's one of the most fun. It's a lovely little romance adventure, and this book really does it justice. As the story goes, the god of love Eros strikes himself with an arrow of his own and falls in love with Psyche, who is a mortal princess, and they're cursed lovers because if she was ever to look at his face, they would be parted forever. What this novel does is give Psyche a lot of dimension. Besides being just, you know, a princess, she is not a damsel in distress by any means. She has a very developed personality, and she is also put in the context of the rest of Greek mythology in a way, which is a choice that I don't know that I always find super fitting, but if you forget about timelines and whatnot, it makes it quite entertaining. And of course, I appreciated the fact that we get Eros's perspective in there, and it gave me mild Circe vibes in the sense that Eros is one of the early primordial immortal gods, and along him we see so many others like Aphrodite, Demeter, and some lesser known ones like Hecate and Zephyrus and Ares. So it's really wholesome, really well written, just a lovely retelling that I enjoyed through and through, lovely romance, and I would really highly recommend this. I gave it 4.5 stars. The longest novel I read in the month of May was The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton or Catton. I'm not too sure how to pronounce it, so apologies. This is a murder mystery set in New Zealand at the time of the gold rush of the 1800s. It follows a large cast of characters as they try to make sense of the sudden death of a seclusive local man. An interesting feature of this pretty massive book is its use of astrology. Now, I thought that was going to be more of a plot device or something that would, you know, show up a lot in the story, but actually it is a lens through which you should read the novel. This feature is quite unique and it is fascinating. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware of this, but as I sort of researched after reading it, everything kind of clicked. But for example, the 12 main characters all represent different zodiac signs, and then other characters will be the planets or the moon. It's just really interesting the way it does that. However, because I'm one of those people who likes to go into books blind, I didn't quite catch everything. Nevertheless, it didn't take away from the story itself. You can quite easily understand it, follow the mystery itself, you can even solve it, I'm sure. But you know, if you're interested in reading it, I would recommend you do your research beforehand. Nevertheless, again, I found this enjoyable. I gave it 3 stars. Okay, now to finish up, I have 2 more books, and there are 2 Sally Rooney novels. I know I am so late to jump on the bandwagon. As I said at the beginning of the video, I really am not one to read romance or even contemporary fiction, but lately I have been feeling in a mood to experiment, and I found this bad boy at the charity shop for only £1, and that was my gateway, I think. Actually, no, that's not true, because I'd already asked my friend to bring me Normal People from the US, because I like that edition better. So I suppose this was just a happy coincidence. Anyway, sorry about the rambling, but the point is that I read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I really enjoyed this book. It revolves around the friendship between 2 girls and how they navigate getting older in their 20s and juggling friendship and relationships. It felt really sort of relatable in a way as somebody who falls under that age bracket. I really enjoyed seeing the progress of each character and the unexpected, heartwarming ending. For some reason, I thought something tragic was going to happen, because I suppose that's the type of book that I read. I really enjoyed this, and I went back and annotated it as well, because it stayed with me really, this story. So I'm really happy to have read it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And finally, as I was saying, I did get Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I read it on my trip that I've just been on, and what can I say? I don't need to describe the plot of this because because the book and the TV show are so famous. It's just a complicated relationship between two people who sort of follow each other through high school and university and just struggle to juggle everything. I don't know, I just felt really relatable and real. This is a story that, again, stayed with me. I will go back and annotate it. I just binged the TV show yesterday because I just couldn't let it go. So yeah, I am now really excited to actually read the third Sally Rooney book, Conversations with Friends. Let me know if you've read that and if you think that it's as good as these two. I gave this 4.5 stars as well. I really can choose between the two which one I prefer. They were both really great and, you know, nice sort of easy reads that put me in a weird mood, but in a good way. Alright, so that was all 12 books that I read this month. I am so happy. This was a super successful month, and as you can see, I enjoyed really most of them besides maybe 2 or 3. So anyway, let me know which book was your favorite that you read this month in the comments, and also just let me know if you have any recommendations for videos that you want to see from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!